Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Billy coming at you with another contest entry today. This time, it is for my buddy Brad over at H2Vinyl. This is for Brad's 100 subs contest that he has titled or labeled the Rock of Fire Explosion, I think. Something like that. The Rock of Fire Explosion. And essentially, what that boils down to is he wanted you to talk about, in detail or in depth about something, maybe a particular album or a particular time or a particular friend. You know, we all have different things that we associate with music, and something that really stuck with us. The first time you were really exposed to something and it set off that explosion or that fire deep down inside you that led you down a certain path musically, or something along those lines. I'm pretty sure that's where he was going with that. At least that's what I took out of it. And Brad, I hope I haven't veered down the wrong path. But because I haven't had a chance to watch anybody else's video entries, I hope the entries are coming in. Also, I hope Bato is getting better with each day that passes. I know you had sent me a comment back saying that things were getting better. So let's continue to hope and pray that every day Bato gets a little bit more like his old self. So with that being said, I'm going to take you guys back to 1983. 1983 for me. My grandmother lived in, I guess, what we would kind of refer to as low income housing. Let's put it that way. She was you're retired and on a very fixed income, so she lived in a low income. We called it the housing, but we didn't really call it the housing projects. You know, because it wasn't the projects. It was just lower income. People that were on maybe a fixed income, but they were really nice units. It was kind of tucked away up in the hills of this little town that I grew up in. But very nice units. A lot of older people that lived in the majority of the units, but there were also some lower income people, families, whether it be single parents or families. And looking back at it now, when I was a kid, I really didn't even pay attention. But looking back at it now, a lot of it were probably single parents that were raising kids on these on a fixed income in the lower income housing. Well, anyway, 1983, I spent a lot of time. The winter of '82, my great grandfather, and I said my grandma. She's my great grandma, but my great grandfather passed away in December of '82. So I started spending a lot more time with my great grandmother, just helping her out. I would have been 8 or 9 at the time, and 8, getting ready to be 9 that following month, and just kind of taking her mind off of the fact that Grandpa had just passed, and just helping around her place, you know, helping keep it picked up, and I. Don't get me wrong, she's the nearest and dearest person to my heart. Or was. She passed in '95. But she was the dearest person that I really ever had. I mean, other than now my wife and kids, but she was a very special person to me, and so I loved and I enjoyed spending so much time there at Grandma's house. But while I was there, I was exposed to and met a lot of new friends, made a lot of new friends. Those kids who were living in the low income housing. They lived up top. So up top was where the younger people stayed, and if you had kids, they kind of put you up there because that's where the playground was. That's where all those activities and the community room and things like that, they were all up top. Down in the second level below was where the older people stayed, and even down at the other. So there were three little levels there, and my grandmother was kind of in the middle. But I made one of my best friends in life uh, that summer of 1983. And what we would do, there were a bunch of kids there, and while I was hanging out with my grandma, I would go out and we would play whatever the kids would play, whether it be tag or swing on the swings. They had swing sets and picnic tables and a little like a recreation type area there that all the kids would get together and kind of conglomerate, and there would be several different games take off and from there. And the most popular game was wiffle ball or tennis ball. We would play that in the streets there up by the park on top, and we had kids that would range from the ages of, like I said, I was 8 or 9 at the time, and they would range from probably, let's say, 5 or 6 years old. There were some 5 or 6 year old kids, some kids younger than me, all the way up to probably 16, 17-year-old kids there, because there were a couple of them that were driving at the time. Like I said, we would play wiffle ball or tennis ball, and they would have their boom boxes, and the cassettes would be playing, and that's where I was exposed to so much great early rock and roll music outside of mom and dad's house, because all I'd really been exposed to it up until then were things like what mom and dad listened to, and then of course Kiss. For me, I was able to have Kiss music in my life from the late 70s, but man, coming into those early 80s. We'd be playing these baseball games or these wiffle ball and tennis ball games, and they would have the boom boxes cranking. And, of course, some of these guys, those 15, 16-year-old guys, they'd be up there smoking, and even at 9 or 10, we might actually go over there and maybe catch a drag or something. But luckily, I'm going to knock on wood and thank whoever I have to thank that I never became addicted to that, because the Lord knows I have an addictive personality. I mean, look at all this shit. But anyhow, that summer of 1983, playing wiffle ball, I was exposed to this album right here, Def Leppard's Pyromania. They played the older guys pretty much always picked what was being played while we played our tennis ball game. And this record, I'll never forget the first time I heard this record. It would have been Rock of Ages, Foolin', Photograph, and I was at this point I would have been 9 years old. Was just completely mesmerized by. I had never heard anything like that. I mean, as great as Kiss was, this was something that was completely different. The vocals, the harmonies, the way everything was stacked, and looking back now, knowing what I know about music, it was that Mutt Lange production that really kind of attracted me to these guys. But I would hear that Def Leppard. They played 2 or 3 tapes, cassettes. I mean, obviously there were a lot more things that were being played that summer, but I'm not kidding you, and I'm not exaggerating one bit when I would say there would be multiple games of baseball or tennis ball or wiffle ball being played every day throughout the summer. So that summer of '83, I was exposed to so much great music. Def Leppard, and like I said, the older guys tend to pick. They ran the boombox. They picked what cassettes. They had complete control as to what we listened to. But I didn't care, because I really was not only being exposed to new music, but it was great new music that I was like, holy cow, what is this? And I gotta get more of it. The second thing that I was turned on to that summer was Sammy Hagar. This is Standing Hampton, and this probably came out in a couple years prior to that, but they were still playing it because it had all those killer heavy metal, hard rock type hits. Obviously the song Heavy Metal, Fall in Love Again, There's Only One Way to Rock, songs like that. What a classic album. That album, of course, really solidified my love for Sammy Hagar. And And my best friend in life at the time, like I said, I met. He was living up there in the housing project, so we started spending as much time together as possible. I would go over to his house, and we would play whatever, whether it be GI Joes or He Man or Transformers, whatever the hell was out at the time. Um, and we would listen to music. And he, I asked him the first time I heard Sammy Hagar, I'm like, what is that? And he's like, that's Sammy Hagar, man. And so we went back to his house, and he had a couple other Sammy Hagar cassettes that we would play. And even later on, in 85, 86, we would revisit that Sammy Hagar stuff. And then so that summer of '83, I was telling you that there were also some older guys that hung out there with us. Well, one of those older guys that would come and go, he didn't stay up there. The only reason he was up there was my Uncle Jeff. And the only reason my Uncle Jeff would come up there was to be chasing this one girl, Phyllis. And so Michael Jeff was chasing Phyllis, and one day he brought this new AC/DC album, Flick of the Switch. Now, this was my first exposure to AC/DC that summer of 1983. While this is not one of my favorite AC/DC albums, it's still great, and it kind of lit that fire inside of me to track down more AC/DC. And I went back into the catalog, and me and my friend Jason would go back, and we discovered together, as a matter of fact, we discovered what For Those About to Rock, and songs like Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. So much great stuff that I discovered that summer. And this was all through those I mean, let's just call it baseball. It is what it is. It's baseball, but when you're playing it without a glove and with a different ball, wiffle ball, tennis ball, whatever it may be, all of this music was discovered through playing that game that summer in 1983, through the boombox that those guys controlled. And lastly, they would play Van Halen. And of course, this being the 40th anniversary of this awesome, epic album, I was immediately hooked on this stuff, and just started eating up everything Van Halen from that point. Then after that, like I said, I started hanging with my buddy Jason a whole lot more, and when we weren't playing outside, whether it be just playing hide and seek or doing things that kids do, playing the baseball game, we would hang out in his room, and we would listen to music all the time, and we would look at we would watch videos. Of course, he didn't have cable. We had cable down at Mom and Dad's house, but he didn't have cable at his house, so we weren't watching MTV. So we would only catch what was on the regular TV on, say, Saturday nights, when we'd catch the videos. And that's when, like I said, I through that fire that was lit inside of me for all that classic great rock and roll, I started discovering stuff on my own. One of those bands was Quiet Riot, and I know this is a later release. This is an '86 release, QR3, because honestly, I was going to show Mental Health, but I show that all the time, and everybody shows that all the time, and I thought, what better time to show this album, because my love didn't just start and end with Mental Health. It went, through that into Condition Critical, into QR3, and so on and so forth. So Quiet Riot, those screaming vocals of Kevin Dubrow and Rudy Sarzo and Carlos Cavazo, Frankie Banali on drums. What a great band. I just love these guys. I think they're so underappreciated and underrated. But that is something that I kind of discovered on my own, with my buddy Jason as well. Twisted Sister is another one. And like I said, all these came from that summer of '83. Of course, this was released in '84, but if it hadn't been for that summer of '83, playing baseball and wiffle ball and tennis ball up in that project, up at the housing with all those kids that ultimately became my friends, even though I lived in a completely different part of town, and my parents were, you know, middle class, maybe upper middle class. I didn't see those barriers between us. They were just kids. They were just friends, and some of those some of those guys are still have become lifelong friends to me. So yeah, if it hadn't have been for the music that those guys were playing, I wouldn't have probably found some of this stuff. Moving right along, this is another one that my buddy Jason and I discovered. This would have been the following year in '84, because like I said, I spent so many years with my buddy Jason. He was either over at my house or I was at his house, all the way through high school, and even later, until I moved away to Nashville. I mean, I was always, and he moved out of his mom's house and got his own place at the age of 16. So we started hanging out a whole lot more over at his place, doing things that, you know, 16, 17-year-olds probably shouldn't have been doing. But man, this Scorpions Love at First Sting, this one really blew our minds, and we played the hell out of this cassette. Like I said, that would have been that summer of '84 probably. And then lastly, getting back to our love of Sammy Hagar. This is why I love Sammy Hagar so much. This was the one that really did it for me. Like I said, we heard Standing Hampton that the older guys were playing on their boombox, but when we went back to Jason's, he had Rematch. And later we ended up getting, like, I think it was Rematch and More in like '85 or '86, whenever it was released. But man, essentially a greatest hits of Sammy. You got Red, I've Done Everything for You, Rock and Roll Weekend, Cruising and Boozing, Turn Up the Music, Trans Am, Highway Wonderland, Love or Money, This Planet's on Fire, Plain Jane, Bad Reputation. Holy cow. I fell in love with Sammy through this album. Still love him to this day. Andy Borders, I don't care what you say. Sammy is the man. And I wanted to show this for Jeff. I picked this up at Goodwill a handful of months back, and I may have shown it in another video. But since you talked about the Showbiz Pizza, and you know, I remember Showbiz Pizza from being a kid with you know, the animated, you know, you go there for the pizza and the video games, but you really go there for the video games and the pizza. But then while you were waiting on your pizza and eating your pizza, they had the little show with the animated characters, and that was the Rock-a-Fire Explosion. So there they are right there. So this kind of goes hand in hand and gets tied in with Brad's contest here. So there's Duke on the back. Kind of cool. It's a little happy birthday single, and something else with Heartaches featuring Duke. So there's the Rock-a-Fire Explosion. That's my entry into Brad's 100 subs contest, his Rock-a-Fire Explosion contest. So there's a little Rock-a-Fire Explosion for you. I hope that fit into what you're looking for, Brad. I hope things are going well. I enjoy your channel. I appreciate the support you've given me, and I continue to support your channel as well. That's definitely my intention. I will watch what I can when I can. But guys, if you're subbed to me and not subbed to Brad over at H2 Vinyl, I will leave a link down below. Head over there, check out his content, give him a sub, give him some likes, and try and get in on this contest. It's really fun. I enjoy, personally what I enjoy, as opposed to people just showing records. Here's what I got today. Here's another thing I got today. Here's another thing. I enjoy the stories behind them. Why do you connect? Why does that record really connect with you, or why do you particularly like an artist? I don't know. That's, and maybe some of you guys don't enjoy that, but that's what I like. So I hope you didn't mind hanging through here for a 20-minute video. But guys, as always, thank you for all your support. I will have some more videos coming soon, but take care, guys. Peace.